Please stop. You are hurting me. I beg you please. Please stop, it's paining me. Sarah cried as Mr. Koko the madman forcefully made out with her. Sarah's life got chartered after this incident and she became pregnant for the famous village madman.
Sarah's journey through pain and rejection was a story that began the moment she realized she was carrying the life Mr. Koko had forced upon her. The shame of her assault weighed heavily on her, but even heavier was the realization that the child growing inside her would forever be a reminder of that horrific night. As her pregnancy progressed, Sarah withdrew further from the world around her. Villagers whispered as she walked by, their gazes sharp with judgment. Some of the women who had once shared laughs with her at the stream now avoided her entirely. The men looked at her with disgust, as though she had willingly chosen this fate. But no one knew the truth, and those who might have guessed didn't care enough to ask. Her mother, Martha, was her only source of comfort. Though she was devastated by what had happened, Martha refused to abandon her daughter. She believed Sarah's innocence, and her protective instincts overpowered the shame she felt whenever she met the eyes of the gossiping villagers. Martha worked tirelessly to support Sarah, fetching water, tending to their farm, and cooking hearty meals to ensure her daughter remained healthy. The months dragged on, and Sarah's belly grew round and heavy. Each kick from within was a mix of joy and sorrow. She longed for the day her child would be born, hoping that somehow the village might forgive her once they saw the innocent baby she carried. But deep down, she knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily. The night of her labor arrived with a heavy storm. The wind howled through the trees, and rain battered the roof of their small hut. Martha sat by Sarah's side, holding her hand as she cried out in pain. After hours of struggle, the cries of not one but two babies filled the air. Sarah had given birth to twins, 2 boys. At first, there was a moment of quiet awe as Martha held the babies. But when she brought them closer to the dim light of their oil lamp, her heart sank. The boys were beautiful, but their faces bore a striking resemblance to Mr. Koko. Their eyes were wide and deep, their features sharp, and their expressions, even as newborns, carried a shadow of the man who had brought so much pain to Sarah. Martha said nothing to Sarah about the resemblance, but the truth was evident. When Sarah finally held her sons, she too saw the unmistakable connection. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from the pain of childbirth, but from the realization that her sons would bear the burden of their origins. The news of the twins spread quickly through the village. Instead of joy, their arrival brought renewed whispers and accusations. The villagers didn't see the babies as innocent children. They saw them as cursed offspring of a madman. The stigma Sarah had endured throughout her pregnancy only deepened. Martha stood by her daughter, shielding her from the villagers' venom as best she could. "They are your children," she told Sarah firmly one evening as they sat by the fire. "They are a gift no matter how they came to be. You must protect them, Sarah." Sarah nodded, her heart heavy with both love for her sons and fear for their future. Years passed, and Sarah's twins grew into lively boys. Despite the villagers' disdain, the boys were strong and intelligent. They played in the fields, chased each other through the tall grass, and filled the hut with laughter. But their resemblance to Mr. Koko made them the target of cruel remarks and superstitions. The twins' presence seemed to bring misfortune, or so the villagers claimed. If a farmer's crops failed or a goat went missing, it was blamed on Sarah's children. People began to avoid her completely, crossing to the other side of the road when she passed by. Martha, now growing older, tried to shield Sarah and her grandsons from the villagers' hostility, but it became harder with each passing year. Despite the isolation, Sarah remained strong for her boys. She worked tirelessly, earning just enough to provide food and clothing for her small family. When the twins turned 5, something unexpected happened. A man came to their hut, asking for Sarah's hand in marriage. His name was Jacob, and he was a widower who had heard of Sarah's beauty despite the village's cruel gossip. He assured her that he didn't believe in the superstitions surrounding her children and promised to take care of her. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. Her mother was hesitant but hoped that the marriage would bring Sarah some measure of peace. The wedding was simple, attended only by a few villagers who came more out of curiosity than support. That night, Sarah prepared herself to begin a new chapter. But the peace was short-lived. As the night deepened and Sarah and Jacob lay together in their hut, a loud hissing sound filled the room. Sarah froze as a massive snake slithered out from the shadows. Its body was thick and dark, its eyes glowing like embers in the dim light. Before either of them could react, the snake lunged at Jacob. By the time Martha and a few villagers arrived, Jacob was dead, his body limp and cold. The snake was gone, leaving no trace except the lifeless man it had claimed. The villagers were horrified but not entirely surprised. To them, this was proof of the curse they had long whispered about. Sarah was blamed for Jacob's death, though she was as much a victim as he was. Suitors came again, and each time, Sarah hesitated but eventually agreed, hoping that perhaps the curse would spare the next man. But the snake returned every time, claiming each husband on their wedding night. After the fifth death, the village could no longer ignore what was happening. A secret meeting was held in the dead of night. The families of the deceased demanded action, insisting that Sarah and her children be banished. Martha begged the council to reconsider. She pleaded with them, reminding them of Sarah's innocence and the pain she had already endured. But her words fell on deaf ears. The villagers were consumed by fear and anger, and they saw no other solution. The next morning, Sarah was told she had to leave. Tears streamed down her face as she packed what little she could carry. Her sons clung to her, confused and frightened. Martha walked with her daughter to the edge of the village, her heart breaking with every step. As they reached the border, Sarah turned to her mother one last time. "I don't know where I'll go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I will survive. For them." Martha embraced her daughter and grandsons, sobbing as she let them go. Sarah walked down the lonely road, her children holding tightly to her hands. The path stretched endlessly before her, lined with dense trees that cast long shadows. The sound of the village faded behind her, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the distant cries of birds. Her tears fell freely as she walked, but she didn't stop. For her sons, she would face whatever lay ahead. She had been cast out, but she was determined to find a place where they could live in peace, far from the curse that had haunted her life. And so, Sarah's journey into the unknown began, with the weight of her past pressing heavily on her shoulders and the uncertain future stretching before her. The family of Mr. Koko, whose real name was Daniel, had always been a powerful and wealthy household. His father, Honorable David, was a prominent figure in the State House of Assembly, known for his influence and affluence. For years, the family had lived under the shadow of Daniel's mysterious affliction, a condition that transformed him into the wandering madman who had caused such chaos in Sarah's life. Daniel's descent into madness began 8 years ago when he mysteriously broke free from the chains meant to restrain him at the family estate. His escape baffled everyone, and despite the family's best efforts, he vanished without a trace. Over time, Daniel wandered from town to town, surviving in the most unpredictable ways. When he arrived in Sarah's village, it was as though fate had drawn him there, though the reasons were beyond anyone's understanding. The day Daniel assaulted Sarah was one of countless tragic consequences of his condition. To Sarah, he had appeared as a harmless stranger in need of help. She had approached him out of compassion, offering him a small naira note and a bit of food, only to have her kindness repaid with violence. After that fateful day, Daniel disappeared from the village as suddenly as he had arrived, leaving Sarah to grapple with the devastating aftermath. Far from the village, Daniel's father, Honorable David, had not given up hope of finding his son. When word reached him that a man fitting Daniel's description had been spotted at a market in a nearby town, he wasted no time. A team was assembled, and a carefully orchestrated plan was set in motion to capture him. The operation unfolded at the market junction. Daniel, drawn by the scent of freshly baked bread, was lured into a car. The scene was tense but efficient, and soon Daniel was back in his father's custody. This time the family took no chances. He was confined to his room, chained to ensure he wouldn't escape again. Desperate for answers and a permanent solution, Honorable David sought the counsel of a renowned spiritual man known for his extraordinary insights. The spiritual man arrived at the estate and conducted a thorough examination of Daniel's condition. After hours of rituals and chants, he delivered an ominous revelation. "There is a vow," the spiritual man intoned, his voice heavy with significance. "A vow made 155 years ago."
My love, although our communities don't typically marry within each other, our union today marks a new beginning. I make a vow that our children, or their descendants, will one day marry and strengthen our bond. If they fail to do so, they will face the consequences of breaking this promise.
It binds him to a girl from a Mambala kingdom. Until the vow is fulfilled, his madness will never be cured, and she, wherever she is, will never know peace. Honorable David was stunned. He had never heard of such a vow or its connection to his son. The spiritual man continued, explaining that Daniel's affliction was not a natural illness but the result of an ancestral promise that had been broken. "The girl," the spiritual man said, "must be found. She holds the key to his healing. Without her, his sanity will slip away completely, and her own suffering will continue until the end of her days." Daniel, now lucid for the first time in years, listened in disbelief. He demanded to know more about the vow and its connection to his life. But the spiritual man was cryptic, refusing to divulge further details. "I cannot see more," he said. "The answers lie in a Mambala kingdom. Go there, find the girl, and the truth will be revealed." Though Daniel had regained his senses, the spiritual man warned that his condition was fragile. He must not enter into any romantic relationships or form attachments with other women until the vow was fulfilled. Doing so, the spiritual man warned, would not only cause Daniel's madness to return but also condemn the girl to unending misery. Honorable David, determined to save his son, began preparations for the journey to Amambala. But neither he nor Daniel had any idea that the girl they sought was Sarah, the woman Daniel in his madness had already wronged. Daniel's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. With his once disheveled appearance now replaced by clean clothes, a sharp haircut, and a restored sense of composure, he looked every bit the wealthy son of Honorable David. His father ensured that Daniel was fully prepared for the journey, providing him with a car and a security guard for his protection. However, the spiritual man's instructions were clear. David must not accompany him. This journey, Daniel was told, was his to undertake alone, for only he could unravel the mysteries of the vow and its connection to the girl in Amambala. The morning of the journey arrived, and Daniel set out with a mixture of nervousness and determination. The lush green landscape soon gave way to the familiar terrain of Amambala village, a place that felt strangely close yet distant in his mind. When they finally reached the heart of the village, Daniel parked his car near the market square and stepped out. His arrival caused an immediate stir. Villagers stopped in their tracks, whispering and pointing in his direction. Despite his polished appearance, they recognized him. "That's him," a woman murmured, clutching her child close. "It's Mr. Koko." The murmurs turned into a growing buzz, and within minutes, word had spread through the village like wildfire. The man who had once roamed their streets in madness had returned, though now he looked strikingly different. Children were hurried inside homes, and market stalls closed hastily as the villagers scattered. Daniel stood amidst the chaos, overwhelmed by the reactions of the people. Everything around him felt oddly familiar, like fragments of a forgotten dream, yet he couldn't piece it together. His head spun with confusion and questions. What had he done here? Why did they fear him? Amidst the fleeing crowd, an elderly man stood firm, his weathered face set with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Daniel approached him, sensing that this man might have the answers he desperately sought. "Good afternoon, sir," Daniel said, his voice steady but tinged with hesitation. "I am here looking for someone." A girl. I was told I would find her in a mambala. The elderly man squinted at him, as if trying to reconcile the polished man before him with the memory of the madman the village once knew. After a long pause, he gestured for Daniel to sit on a nearby wooden bench. "You don't recognize this place, do you?" the man asked, his tone heavy with meaning. Daniel shook his head. "It feels familiar, but I can't remember. Please help me. I need to find the girl tied to a vow made long ago. It's the only way to understand what's happening to me." The man sighed deeply, leaning on his walking stick. "You don't just look like the man we called Mr. Koko. You are him." Daniel's breath caught. "What?" The man nodded solemnly. "Years ago, you wandered into this village. You were not yourself. You lived like a madman, roaming our streets and causing chaos wherever you went. We feared you, but we also pitied you. Then one day you did something unforgivable. You assaulted a young girl named Sarah. She was kind, compassionate, and only trying to help you. Instead, you destroyed her life." Daniel's chest tightened as the man's words sank in. "Where is she now?" he asked urgently. The man's expression grew darker. "Sarah's life has been one of tragedy ever since. After you left, she discovered she was pregnant with your children, twins. The stigma of what happened never left her. People whispered, they judged, and they ostracized her. But that wasn't the worst of it. When she came of age, suitors began to seek her hand in marriage. Yet every man who married her died on the night of their wedding. A curse, they called it." Daniel's heart pounded as he listened. He could barely comprehend the weight of what the man was saying. "And where is Sarah now?" he demanded. The old man sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping under the weight of the memory. "She was banished from the village after the fifth man died. The council decided she was cursed and had to leave. Her mother, Martha, pleaded for mercy, but it was no use. Martha couldn't bear the loss. She died of heartbreak a few months later." The world seemed to tilt beneath Daniel's feet. His mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fall into place. Could Sarah be the girl the spiritual man had spoken of? Was she the key to the vow? And was the suffering she endured tied to his past actions? "Do you know where she went after she was banished?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. The old man shook his head. "No one knows for certain. She left with her twins, and that was the last we heard of her. Some say she wandered into the forest, while others believe she found refuge in another village. But wherever she is, she has suffered more than anyone should ever have to." Daniel sat in silence, his thoughts churning with guilt and determination. The realization that his madness had brought so much pain to an innocent woman was almost too much to bear. But he knew one thing for certain. He had to find Sarah. The vow, the curse, and her suffering were all connected, and he was determined to set things right. He stood abruptly, thanking the old man for his time. As he climbed back into his car, the villagers continued to watch him from a distance, their whispers following him like ghosts. "Where are we going now, sir?" the security guard asked cautiously. Daniel gripped the steering wheel, his jaw set with resolve. "We're going to find Sarah. No matter how long it takes, no matter where she is, I need to find her." With that, the car rumbled to life, and Daniel drove away from the village, his heart heavy with guilt and the weight of his mission.